I teach this to recruiters, so I'm doing the good work to open the door for you, okay? Because people who do not have college degrees undervalue themselves for a million different reasons. And I want to remind you that you are good, capable, and deserving of work, no matter what your education is. Do not let systems that were not made for you to thrive stop you from thriving. Please, because I have sat with thousands of hiring managers at this point. In the first months of my business, I wrote 1,000 job postings myself. I really want to allow people to be free here because the thing that most of us don't know about job postings is that.
Welcome back to another episode of the 5 Minute Career Hack. You all know me. I am Alicia Wade. I am here. I am so excited to talk to Katrina today. They are a keynote speaker, recruiting expert, also dog lover, which I think we see the pups in the back. But most importantly, how we've met is a top voice on LinkedIn. So welcome to the 5 Minute Career Hack. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me. Mutual fan, big time. And so I was so excited to be able to come here and let other people see our conversations and tune in.
So today, I think you and I have aligned that we are going to help our listeners learn and what not necessarily hacks. I know we're a 5 minute career hack, but some things that they can do and what they can learn from a recruiter. So I think a good place to start is like how, I mean, obviously we see the news to our point in the headlines around so many people being laid off, people pivoting careers. Like, how is life right now for a recruiter? I'm just curious, a recruiter, like that whole space, like how is that going?
Yeah, so we're seeing both a reduction in workforce in the recruiting world and an increase in volume. And how that's going to impact you as a job seeker is that there are fewer people available to look at your resume. And I really want to emphasize, underline, bold, italicize, people looking at your resume. Because as much as those headlines and all these folks like to talk about the machine reading your resume, that is not real or true at some of the most technologically advanced companies in the world. And so I can almost bet that, the other 97% of companies that exist in the world aren't doing that right now. However, we have to set our expectations aligned with the fact that there's one person handling the job of three in many places.
Wow. So with that knowledge, where does a job seeker start? Like what would you advise job seekers today, knowing that it's even more competitive, right? There's people that are very skilled, tons of experience. And how do we take this information and now knowing that the person that's the first ticket to us moving forward, like where does a job seeker start in your opinion?
I think there are two things that I'm advising people to think about right now is number one, and this is kind of a high level, and I do not want to create false urgency when I say this, but I do think it's important to be early in the application process, okay? So set those alerts, set the Google alert, set defined time in which you sit at your desk between X time and X time and do your applications. And the ones for the jobs that were posted most recently, go to the top of the list, not the old stuff. All right. So really, really focus on that urgency because, when they pull that report, it's in order of who applied in what order. And if there's one person looking at 200, you want to be in the first 20, not the last 20.
I love that tip. It's so interesting. When I was in HR, and I started my career, we would talk about evergreen posts, right? And then we'd have to refresh the post. And even on this side as an HR professional, you were resetting the post so that you can get the new people to the top of it, right? Or folks were not applying because it was 8 months ago that you posted this. So it's interesting on that side of being the first to also apply. So what would you say is step two? Like what should people be looking for? So they're trying to be an early, kind of activator on jobs that they're looking for. Are there keywords? Like where do they do from a search bar or things like that? Because there is a myth, or I would say there is a component, right, where we know technology is there. So is there anything that on this side, maybe if there's a human watching it, should I use technology or like what should I do as a job seeker?
So I think there's kind of like a twofold piece here is that first layer is searching many different job titles. Because most people don't know this, and I know it because I'm a job post writing expert, is that all job titles are completely made up. All job titles are completely made up. Please do not drive your career or job search simply based on the title you want. That is a fallacy. it is snake oil. Focus on the work you want to do. And some great tools for that. Use recruiting tools to help you, right? So I have a free job title generator on my site where you can literally enter the work you like at the top, hit enter, and it will generate alternative job titles for you. Titles that might apply to your work that maybe you've never had before. The thing I would tell you next is make sure you go on Google, search that job title in the word resume, and look at those career paths. Look at what those people have done. Find even more alternatives and set as many alerts as you want. Do not lock into one title, one level, because I'll tell you, I've been called a lot of things, both in a funny way and a literal way in job titles. And honestly, it does not matter what you're called. It matters the work you do. And the next layer to that is making sure that your resume matches the job. And this does not mean pulling one word off of the job post and moving it over. I want to talk about the philosophy here, okay? Because a lot of people oversimplify, I think, when they're like, keyword match, you're okay, yeah, but what I actually need you to do is make your resume so obvious to me that you are a match for that job posting. And that does not mean copying and pasting what the job post says. It means instead of, I literally gave this advice this morning to a college grad who's applying to an intern. They listed out every Microsoft product, even though the job post said Microsoft 365. They listed out every Adobe product.
Wasted space,
You get
right?
it. And recruiters, I hate to be like this, okay? But remember, if I'm looking at 200 resumes, it's a yes or a no, and you got 6 seconds, maybe, if I'm feeling generous. If it's not a one-to-one, obvious match, I'm moving on.
Right.
So
Because you're not
it
reading the
means,
room. It's already asking your
yes,
emotional intelligence. Like, who doesn't have all of these skills in Microsoft? Right? Like, why are you wasting valuable real estate? To your point, think about how long it takes. Because we talk about that 5 to 7 seconds all the time. So that is a gem. I want to make sure somebody rewinds and like rewires their mind of that as well. Because to your point, you don't have time.
yes. So
Wow.
even what I was telling this student, so interns are always trained to put your college at the top. No, no, no. Put your college at the bottom because you need to show you've already done this. And I know that sounds counterproductive because you're like, oh, this is my internship. I don't know anything yet. Oh, no, no, no. If I'm picking you for a highly competitive internship, you need to show me you already know what to do because I'm putting people here who we don't have to manage to death, right? And so often we think like, oh, well, I'm just showing them my best stuff. No, no, no. You're showing them that you know how to do the job and you want to.
Yeah, that is just such a gem there because to your point, a lot of students they're being taught and I hate to, it sounds bad, but like we try to major in keeping it real on this space and on this platform. And that's why I knew you'd be a great guest here. But you're being taught by people that aren't practitioners of the work. They're telling you textbook, and you got to find a way to marry the two between real life, someone that does this every day, someone that's managing the workload versus, sure, that applies, but then you go back to also what I'm hearing you saying, is that working for you? So how many times we coach people and we hear them say, "Oh, I've applied to 20 jobs. I've applied to 30 jobs. Nobody's calling me back." This is a great tip. Like, how do you now go back to say, "Okay, someone taught me this, but if that's not working for me, I maybe need to pivot and do something different."
Yes. And that's where I think it's really, really important to like set those benchmarks, right? So at 30 days of job searching, of really putting your effort in, if you are not getting results, do something different.
Wow.
Okay. I'm sorry. I love a guidance counselor. I love a career coach out of college. And most of those people have not looked for a job for 20 years. And I can tell you, as someone who looked for a job 20 years ago, I graduated college in 2003. It was a different world.
It was.
We still had to bring our copies in. You remember fancy paper,
I graduated in 2002, so I'm right there with you. Yeah, you had your
the
like it was
paper.
that what was it called? Like the inserts that you put in, you like clip it on there. It was like a paper. You know what I mean? Like they don't know what those are
Oh,
now. We know. We know.
we were office maxinistas. Okay.
Yes. I mean, couldn't tell us anything. The paper was thick. You had the things, and to your point, it got even then got thrown into a pile. of 200. It was a literal pile of 200 versus now it's a virtual, right?
Exactly. And now we're just putting these same practices. They are often recommending the exact same practices they recommended 20 years ago without thinking about this technology component, but also thinking about the fact, and they don't get it, that recruiters are getting way more applications than they could ever want to look through. And so if you're a job seeker that's applying right now, you need to consider the human on the other side as much as I try to encourage recruiters to consider you.
Wow, that is such good advice. Um, I want to pivot here because I know you have such a deep knowledge around also creating a job post. So not only the human part, sorting through the actual application, what tips, I know you went through of like how the job seeker can go through and find a job. What are the things can we learn from you in regards to your experience around actually creating these job posts? What should we
Yeah.
know?
I really want to allow people to be free here because the thing that most of us don't know about job postings is that they have not changed for the last 100 years, and neither of us could have gotten a job 100 years ago. We can
Yeah.
name that, right? And
Yes.
when you continue to practice the exact same strategies, you bring the same bias. And I want to preface it that way because often what I see from basically anyone who is not a white, cisgendered male
Mhm.
is that they talk themselves out of applying because of one detail, because of preferred requirements, because they see something that makes them believe they are not enough. And I'm here to tell you it's the world that tries to make you feel like you are not enough. Don't ever let a job post make you feel that way. If you are 70% qualified, if you feel confident you could do that job and you see one requirement that doesn't quite make sense or doesn't align with your experience, you better apply anyway. Do not let systems that were not made for you to thrive stop you from thriving. Please, because I have sat with thousands of hiring managers at this point. In the first months of my business, I wrote 1,000 job postings myself. Okay. I did every hiring manager intake. I wrote every single job post, and I will tell you, they lack confidence in what they need. They do not understand what they need. And so 90% of the time, that is a wish list. And please do not let their lack of education or lack of confidence stop you from having access to something that could change your life.
Wow, that is so empowering because we see that all the time, and you can break down the statistics, right? It gets even scarier when you start thinking about certain groups that don't apply for those reasons. And to your point, the pool is what they're going for, so they don't even know about the input, right? So we're not even getting to the part of where people are measuring the diversity of the pool, but not even thinking about those that don't even apply because of these tips that you just gave. That's phenomenal. What are some common things that you see in job posts that deter people from like if there's anything literally that you see that people can watch out for that they may think are normal, right? Like you and I see this every day. We have a frame of reference exactly when you say that. But those that aren't in management and don't know those keywords where you're like, that's the wish list. Here's an example. What would be some examples?
Exaggerated years of experience. So they put a window of like 8 to 30 years. And yes, I've really seen that. Or 8 to 15. And you're like, those are two different jobs. Okay. Years of experience is a way to quantify time, but it does not qualify people.
Wow.
Because those years of experience, what they should be telling you is what did you do during that time that qualifies you to be successful? What they do is pick a number, much like we pick a lottery number.
Love it.
But it's inside their brain. So if you are 1 year off, if you're 2 years off, but you know you can do the work they describe, apply anyway. The second one that's holding a lot of people back, and we see it all the time, are those college degree requirements.
Say
I
more.
saw someone call it a paper ceiling.
Wow.
So college degrees, and I teach this to recruiters, so I'm doing the good work to open the door for you, okay? Because people who do not have college degrees undervalue themselves for a million different reasons. And I want to remind you that you are good, capable, and deserving of work, no matter what your education is, because college in the United States of America is a privilege, not a right. And if you had had the privilege of choosing to go to school and invest in your education instead of the responsibility of taking care of a child, of paying your bills, of having to prioritize other key safety needs before education, there is nothing wrong with you. And you deserve work, because the majority of roles in today's workforce are not a pipeline from education. I want my doctor to have a degree. I want my lawyer to have a degree. I want my accountant to have a degree, and my nurse, because they learned how to do the job in school. If you do not learn how to do the job at school, you should not have a degree requirement on that job. And that goes for you too. If they list it as preferred or nice or whatever they do, you should apply anyway if you know how to do the job. And if you end up in a scenario where you're in an interview and they're like, do you have a degree? No, I have 15 years of experience doing the job, and my no coursework would have been applicable to the work I can do today.
Wow, that what's so interesting. I've been having my own journey with this, and I've debated this for many years in my career. And when I first started, you're indoctrinated into this, like, hey, you can only do this, and that was how I grew up. And my parents are boomers, so definitely in that thought of like, this is the, kind of to your point, pipeline to a great life. Like, you got to do this. And I had these conversations with my mom all the time when she just doesn't believe it. I'm like, Mom, these are like stats. You can look it up. The percent of people in our most educated states in the United States, it's maybe 30%. So people will have you think the majority of people have degrees. Number one, right? It's the othering. And then you're like, okay, maybe in like DC, right? Washington, around that area, you see the DMV is maybe around 37 because it's very specialized. Was, right? We'll say that prior.
Mhm.
But other than that, that is not the world we live in, right? And then you go into then there's a thought, and then I go to the second piece of what I've been really realizing personally, right? Like, you read about it and you see it. It's also really the main thing that you're getting in college that's not a specialized role, right? That's moving there like an engineer, like these roles, is it's around the social capital. That's what you're getting in college, right? So this is why you can look up certain roles and it's like, oh, everybody went to Harvard. Well, because my dad went there and my son and my uncle and on and on and on. It's not necessarily the information that they're sharing because you go and find out what the degree was in. So somebody may not know that as their lived experience. So I think that is just so empowering what you just brought up, that you can read about it, but until you've experienced it, you just think that you are less than. And it's you and not everybody else, when really the majority do not have degrees, right? And I'm not saying, and by no means am I saying that if that's something that you have as a goal. I went to college, but what we're saying is if that is your current skill set and you don't have a desire to go to college, that is okay. That is okay.
Exactly.
It is okay. So it just burns
Exactly.
me up.
Yes, and advocate for yourself, right? I'll never forget. I was the keynote of this conference, okay? And we had the Q&A, and the very first question I got was, "Well, how do you gain soft skills without going to college?" And I said, honestly, I was not prepared for that question. And I said, "Well, let me tell you about somebody. My grandmother immigrated here when she was 18 years old. And ultimately, she got divorced in the 60s when it was absolutely unheard of for anyone to get divorced. And she raised three children without any support, no child support, nothing, and no family to support her or help take care of her children. Would you tell me she's not a hard worker or she doesn't know how to work hard?
Or is
She
innovative or intuitive I mean, like, I can think of, like, I don't even know all the details, but I can come up with probably a good 10 soft skills just in hearing that headline.
Exactly. We can gain soft skills by living. And I just
Mm.
want to really, really empower people. Like, who you are matters. Vulnerability is powerful. All right. Show up as you. If you get to that interview and you're scared about that college degree, you don't want to make it 3 interviews in and then they're like, oh, sorry, we can't hire you because of the degree. Be bold. Say it up front. name it, but also provide data to show why that is not a criteria for success on this role. And if they have some business case of why you need a degree, let it go, because they clearly have a privilege bias inside of their organization that makes them believe they only want to work with privileged people, and they can deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah, and it comes up in different spaces. So if you're seeing that in a role, right? Because I've worked in roles where that was the pipeline, right? It
Yeah.
was we can bring people in from college. That's how I was recruited. And those that had worked their way up to that position, it was just kind of this, like energy between the two. But to your point, if you do get past that and it's already a red flag for you, you're going to see it in a promotional process as well. So if this is a value of this company, there, I love the first tip you gave around like start with what you like to do, what you want to do, and then look at those roles. This is the same filter I'm hearing you say of if you see that and this is already showing, and I get in some cases you're not in a position to say, hey, I'm gonna turn this job down because I'm seeing this red flag, but you should start with the end in mind. Right. Like you're going into this
Mhm.
job knowing like this probably in a long-term thing because I'm already kind of feeling some type of way about exactly what you're calling out.
And that truth is, you know this, and I know that's why you're bringing it up, is because when you feel that little thing in your gut, I have never been wrong. I have
Fact.
never been wrong.
Facts.
And
Facts.
I'm not special, nor am I a fortune teller. And I truly, in corporate America, you can trust your soul, you can trust your gut. It is divine and it will help you. But like you said, you got to play with the end in mind.
Mhm.
You don't stop applying, you don't stop keeping your stuff ready. You got that little, even if you don't have your resume updated and you're actually sitting there applying, you better believe when I feel that little red flag happen, I start doing a projects document where I write down every project that I would forget about if I were 6 months in and panicked, right? So I'm going to list and make sure that project list is very, very specific. How many people are on the team? How long did it take? What results did you drive? I want you to give yourself way too much information, because I can almost promise you a little short paragraph will make turning that into one sentence on your resume really, really easy, but also make that one sentence highly impactful.
I love that, Cat. I'm adding that to my toolkit because one of my co-founders, Candace, she's a big proponent of the brag file, right? Like, hey, awards, and she kind of keeps that. But I love this in tandem, right? Of like this dance you can do with both because that is more outward validation or align with the company goals or wherever you work, which is important. You got to be aligned and driving those. But to your point of projects, that goes back to you understanding of how you did it, where you started. You're able to look at milestones and you're already building in interview questions with this file. So I just love that tip. That's amazing.
Exactly. And because those are the things that are normally missing from the resume, especially when you're rushing. So
Yes.
what I see, two things that are missing from most people's resumes when they send them over to me because they're panicked, are number one, they do not list the industry of the company they worked at.
Oh, wow.
Because again, remember, I'm a recruiter and I'm looking at 200 resumes. If you didn't work at monster.com, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, I don't know that company. You can assume I've never heard of them. All right. There's a very, very small
Yeah.
percentage of organizations that are known worldwide. So be explicit about the industry, especially if it's a match. The second thing that's missing is what I call the scope and scale of your work. How much, how many? It is never a project, right? It is, I worked with 5 people to complete a 6-week large scale delivery that helped us deliver this result. Scope, scale is that second check of numbers, because what a recruiter is trying to do in addition is make sure you can do it at their company. It's not just that you can do the work. Can you do it in this environment? Because being an HR director at a 5-person company and being an HR director at a 5,000 person company is 2 different jobs.
Yeah, I love that tip. And this is great. These are things that if you right now are downloading a resume builder for yourself, or you're like, oh, I can do this on AI, I'll just throw it into Chat GPT. Your years of experience and this filter and this insight is invaluable because the system doesn't know that. So I love the gems that you're dropping for the audience today. Thank you so much, Kat. Anything else? I mean, this has been such a rich conversation. I know the audience is like, even if they just do these 3 things, like this is going to be life changing if because this is a time people are going to start looking, right? Like,
Yes.
the volume right now, you're preparing in April, May, June, right? As school years change, things happen. So if that's you, if unfortunately you were recently laid off, you're in the job market, we see the numbers every single day. These tips are practical that you can absolutely do today. You can do this week and see action. So I love these are all actionable things that are easy, right? It's just going to take some work and take you to sit down. I always say put yourself in timeout and do it. But anything else, like you're like, hey, this is the thing that I would say is most missed that we didn't talk about today.
I think the biggest one, and it's the hardest for people to hear, is if you think there's one thing that's stopping you from getting a job, you say it first, not last.
Wow.
We talked about it briefly on the college degree, right? If you've been through a couple of processes, you got to the third round and you got rejected in the third round because of the degree. You got to this place and they heard about your layoff and they let you go. Like, I think we all carry a lot of things that are not true because we're not taught how to look for a job, which is why I'm here, because I love that you created a podcast that actually lets people learn from people who have also looked for jobs, right? And the reality here is, like, it's just so easy to tell yourself that they won't care or you hide it. And truly, I believe that if we can address things out front confidently, that we can change everything. And let me give one example, because I know a lot of people, they hear that and they're like, yeah, of course you're confident. You run your own business. Like, you
You
can
told me
be
you did a
confident.
thousand. You told me you did 1,000 job postings. Of course, of course.
Right? So I job hopped. I am a job hopper. If you looked at my resume and I were to go and apply for a job, they would get that impression because I did hop around jobs. I moved for opportunities. I moved for work I wanted to do. So when I was looking for jobs and I had to do interviews and they said, tell me about yourself, the very first thing I said, well, if you look at my resume, you might be confused. You're probably wondering, why did I go through all of these jobs and switch? And I can promise you that all of it added up to making me the perfect next person for you. And here's why. And then I talk about moving, and I don't need to explain, well, I didn't like this manager and this happened and that happened and all of that. You just create a frame that answers the question subtly and then give them the answer, right? But please stop operating with fear. Be bold. This is your future.
Oh, that is such a gem to end on. I've taken a lot of notes. I always, if you saw me, I commit to this each week that it's a learning for me as well. I'm not in the job market, but it's always something to learn. And even if you're not and you're listening to it today, if you can share this with someone, or it may be giving you some closure or something that even happened in the past. A story you've been telling yourself, a narrative that you've been holding on to of why you're not there. So wherever you are in your job search or not, I think there were things you shared today, Kat, that are going to pull some things together. So I appreciate it. So one thing we always do before we wrap up is we ask our guests for 5 words, since it's the 5 minute career hack, and people usually go into all the rules. You don't seem like a person that follows the rules, so I'm sure you didn't think of the restrictions. So it can be a sentence, it can be a mantra that you have, maybe it's something that came up as we were talking. But what would you leave the audience with today?
Um, I think, yeah, move boldly. I'll
Mm,
only use two. Or
love
maybe
you.
move boldly. This is your life.
Ooh.
I spent my whole life believing there was a right way, a right path, a single direction toward my dreams. And I can most certainly promise you that when you allow your path to be divine, when you allow yourself and you remember that you only end up where you belong, that you always end up exactly where you belong.
That is amazing place to end on. Thank you so much for your life's work. Thank you for your life. I am so excited to know you in a virtual space, but then now have a friend in this space. I took a lot away today. Those that were moved by this episode, you can find Kat. We will have all of their information in our show notes as usual. I would highly recommend you follow their blog. I read it all the time. I was even catching up on your latest this week. So I was looking forward to seeing this haircut. I was like, oh yes. So it's always different tips that are there. You can get this and continue. So I'm glad now, as you are a friend of the 5 minute career hack, that our audience can follow and be blessed by the things that you share as well. So with that, it's been another episode, and thank you all for joining in this week. We'll see you next time.